I asked a favor of you, and you refused it. I asked it of God, and he granted it. A quote from Saint Scholastica talking to her twin brother, Saint Benedict. Today we remember Scholastica, who dedicated her life in service to God and the Church on this, her feast day. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The head of the Catholic Church in Hong Kong hints the Vatican and China may have reached a deal to overcome a decades-long controversy. China's Communist Party cut relations with the Vatican in the 50s and ordered Chinese Catholics to take their orders only from Beijing, including the appointment of bishops. Cardinal John Tong says the two sides have reached a preliminary agreement. The Vatican hasn't commented. Tomorrow marks the 4-year anniversary of the day Pope Benedict XVI shocked the world, announcing he would step down as pontiff.
Non jam aptas esse ad manus Petrinum eque administrandum.
Speaking in Latin to a group of cardinals, Benedict said after examining his conscience, he decided he was no longer suited to be pope due to his age. The news stunned the church and the globe. The Pope's spokesperson at the time, Father Federico Lombardi, found himself in the middle of a media circus. Vatican correspondent Mary Shevlin joins us from Rome. Mary, you were in Rome when Benedict XVI announced his resignation. Tell us about the initial reactions in and around the Vatican that day. What was it like?
Wyatt, well, first of all, he made the announcement in Latin, so not even everyone in the room that was there when he made the historic announcement understood exactly what had taken place. The news, the rumors had started to circulate that he had announced that he would be stepping down, and then we had the final confirmation from the Holy See press office, and the whole world was abuzz, we know, that was making headlines everywhere. But this was something, Wyatt, that we had no frame of reference for. This is an event that hadn't happened in the Catholic Church for 600 years. So as journalists and even people working in the Vatican, we're trying to figure out the terminology to use to express what had just happened. And we know that February 11th was the day he announced that he would be stepping down. He continued to reign until the end of February. We remember those moving images of him making his way out of the Vatican Palace for the last time. He got into the papal helicopter and made his way to Castel Gandolfo, just near here, Rome, the papal residence there, where he greeted the crowds waiting for him, said his last goodbyes as pontiff, and gave his final blessing.
The director of the Holy See press office was also bombarded with media questions when that news broke. You had sat down with him this week to talk about Pope Benedict's decision to resign. How does he view it looking back in retrospect 4 years later?
He said that he was surprised, of course, but he said not that surprised. And I asked him what his initial reaction was when he got the news firsthand. He said he found out just a few moments before in order to be able to prep us journalists. And this is what he had to say.
For me, it was a surprise, yes, we can say, but not so a big surprise, because who was working and following from near the activity of the Pope. There were little signs that this was something at which he was reflecting.
So again, not that much of a surprise, and he spoke a lot about how, he, through various speeches, was able to get a glimpse of this was something that Pope Benedict was seriously considering and taking to prayer. And he also talked about the great health that Pope Benedict is in at the moment. He says he does use a walker inside the monastery here in Vatican City where he lives. He's going to be turning 90 in April. We'll see if there are any special festivities for that. And he said he is slowing down just a bit, but he said as any 90-year-old would.
Of course, but it is nice to hear the Pope Emeritus is in good health and continues to pray and read to sharpen his mind. Mary Shevlin, our Vatican correspondent. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
To see more of Mary's interview with Father Lombardi, check out next week's episode of Vaticano here on EWTN. Dr. Matthew Bunson, an EWTN senior contributor, joins us now with more. Matthew, what has Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI been doing now within his retirement?
Yeah, as we just heard from Mary, the Pope Emeritus has very good health, which has enabled him to continue doing some of the things that he loves the most. He's studying, he's praying, he's meditating, he's contemplating. We know from various interviews he's given that he spends a good part of his day praying, the breviary, of course, reflecting theologically on the Church Fathers and Scripture. We also know that he spends a good time of his week preparing for his Sunday homilies. I think all of us would give anything to be able to hear those homilies every Sunday.
sure.
But he's focusing on that, and he's really giving his life over to prayer.
Do you think in that way he's really still serving the church?
Yeah.
Organization, institution?
Last June, on his 65th anniversary of his priestly ordination, Pope Francis visited and celebrated with Pope Emeritus Benedict. And Pope Francis said something really interesting. He said that he wanted the world to know how grateful he was for Pope Emeritus Benedict continuing to serve, serving with vigor, but also with his prayer, but also for reminding the world of the importance of the elderly, that you still have value and worth. So Francis understands that Benedict is serving us in a way, too, that Benedict understands that simply by praying, you can still serve the church and the world.
What do you think the relationship is like between Francis and Benedict?
Yeah, well, on the day that Benedict left, on February 28th, 2013, he pledged himself his obedience to the new pope. And that's been something that has been a hallmark of his time away from the Petrine ministry. He is incredibly faithful to Francis, but he's also expressed his gratitude. As he said at that 65th anniversary celebration, he thanked Francis for allowing him to be safe in Francis's goodness. For his part, Francis knows that he has a counselor and an advisor, somebody that he can turn to every day for advice, someone unique in the world who understands the immense burden of the papacy.
We had mentioned that when Pope Benedict resigned, he made his announcement in Latin.
Yeah.
What was the significance of that? Why is Latin important?
Well, Benedict, of course, is fluent in Latin, both written and spoken. And he wanted to make this announcement in much the same way that his very first words as Pope were in Latin to the cardinals who elected him, by making sure that the world knows that this is the official language of the church with an official declaration, but it also had the proper syntax, the right Latin terminology, that his resignation was official, but that it was also theologically sound and of freedom.
It sounds just like what Pope Benedict would have done, an intellectual himself.
Yeah.
Dr. Matthew Bunson is also a senior contributor here at the National Catholic Register. You can read his articles at ncregister.com.